everyone. Welcome to Picture This, first of the new year. Chad, this is my co-host Chad Webb. Chad, how are you doing?
I am not an animal. I am a human being.
And you
Yeah,
are in a new
I'm,
location, Chad. Why don't you tell everyone where you are?
yeah. I bought a new house. So everything's
Congratulations.
kind of bland here. Thank you. Everything's kind of bland here. Just got like the wall behind me,
At least the jacket matches the aesthetic now,
yeah,
It kind of blends in with the wall.
and relevant to one of the movies today. I got a Twin Peaks shirt on.
There you
So
go. Yeah, one of the director. A lot of directors with very notable credits here on this
yep.
on this lineup of Best Picture nominees. How the show works is we go through every single Best Picture nominee of every single month. We jump around. We don't go in, or every single year. We don't go in order from beginning to end. We jump around. This month we have 1980 because we had a guest or a friend of ours reach out and say that he was very interested in joining the show as a guest. And he specifically said that 1980 was a year he's interested in. So, Chad, why don't we bring him on? Mr.
Absolutely.
Dan Skip Allen. Hello, Dan. How are you?
Heyo.
Hey guys, hey, thank you. I mean, this has been so long ago that we talked about this. I love the concept of your show so much. I was like, oh my
Thanks.
God, if you have a guest, please have me on. Can we please? I was like almost like begging. Could we do 1980? Because I got a lot to say about how things transpired at the Academy Awards in 1981 for the calendar year of 1980.
That's right.
Hey Dan, it's actually interesting because we weren't thinking about doing guests until you said have me on. So now this is why we're doing this.
Yeah, you inspired this, so thank you, Dan. Before we get into the movies themselves, which are, if you don't remember from the last episode, everyone watching, Coal Miner's Daughter, The Elephant Man, Ordinary People, Raging Bull, and Tess. Before we get into those movies, we just kind of want to talk about the year itself, 1980, and especially with Dan being on and being so enthusiastic about the year. Dan, what is so appealing to you about 1980? Like, why did you want to guest on this show? What is special to you about 1980? Please tell us.
Well, I was 7 years old in 1980, and I mean, 6, 7 in there somewhere. I really came into my own as a film aficionado, and I just started absorbing all kinds of films from all kinds of genres, and also weekly watching Siskel and Ebert every
Yeah.
week, listening to those guys, finding out what they liked, what they didn't like, and one of the films that absolutely championed, one of the filmmakers they absolutely championed was Raging Bull and Martin Scorsese.
This movie is very direct. Here's a man who is filled with great insecurity, with great rages, with great violence, can't deal with anyone, takes it out in the ring.
A superb performance. Love these fight scenes more than Rocky, more artful, although I like Rocky. This is really great stuff, I think.
To this day, Martin Scorsese is my favorite director, and Robert De Niro is my favorite actor of all time.
Nice.
I don't care what anybody else says. They're the greatest. Steven Spielberg's my number one. Scorsese is my number one. Spielberg is I'm going to circle him and say he's the greatest of all time. But Scorsese is my personal number one.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with those two. Yeah.
But I know, no arguments, Spielberg is the greatest of all time. Hitchcock's in my top 5. But De Niro, to me, his filmography, especially in the early days, 70s and 80s, was just phenomenal. And anybody that knows me, I'm wearing my hat. Chad knows this. I'm a huge sports fan. And I want sports films that really grip you, that really say something about the people that they're depicting, fictional or otherwise. And Raging Bull really does that. But that year, you had Friday the 13th, one of the greatest horror films of all time. Another one of my top 5 films of all time, The Empire Strikes Back.
For sure.
But the 5 films nominated for the Academy Awards were just phenomenal films. And one of them, I have a lot to say about when the time comes, if the time comes. I just feel like it's a subculture of people that really doesn't matter anymore, because you have so many types of families, so many types of traumas, so many types of depression, so many types of family domestic abuse and family domestic problems. 42 years ago, it becomes an afterthought to me. compared to what we're going through in this society today.
Yeah.
And I just don't think things turned out the way it should have turned out. And that's why I really have issues with the 1981 Academy Awards.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely talk about it because I know some years we get to and they were notorious for being upsets, and this is definitely one of those years that people consider in like the top 10 upsets of all time because obviously Raging Bull is on the AFI like top 5. It is up there. It is one of the most renowned films of all time. So talking about all these films, especially some of them that I hadn't even heard of until I saw this list of films, and then some that I've heard of so much, and then even directors that are still working or still have such a great filmography. It's really interesting to see how these films have aged over time. There's the Blu-ray. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk about these movies. Before we get to these movies, Chad, you sometimes do tell us a little bit about like what was going on in the world in 1980 because I think that's also important to understand before we get into these films itself. To talk about just the culture and what was going on in the world of 1980. Chad, if you want to give us just a little brief synopsis of what was going on, and of course we cover who was born in 1980 and died in 1980 also because sometimes it's fun to reminisce and see what big names we got from the year 1980.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have it kind of short but sweet here, because we might get a lot into dialogue later. But 1980, the Rubik's Cube makes its international debut out of Hungary. Pac-Man is released in Japan. United States heat wave claims 1,700 lives.
Wow.
The Unabomber was up to no good. Ronald Reagan is nominated for president. What? The actor? Spoiler alert, he wins. Vigdis Finnbogadóttir is elected as the world's first democratically elected female president in Iceland. I tried with the name. World Health Organization certifies the eradication of smallpox globally. It's just like chickenpox, but smaller. Don't quote me on that. 82 countries boycotted the Summer Olympics, protesting apartheid in South Africa, and the Winter Olympics are in Lake Placid, New York. No reports of crocodile attacks during the event are known.
Interesting. Yeah, so a pretty eventful year. Chad, were there any people born or unfortunately passed in 1980 worth noting?
A ton of people born, a few people notable by me died,
Okay.
but big people. Okay, births. Zooey Deschanel, new girl. Jason Segel, Nick Carter, Matthew Lawrence, Christina Ricci, Jason Ritter, Regina Spektor, Justin Roiland, Chelsea Clinton, Rebel Wilson, Catherine Waterston, Laura Prepon, Channing Tatum, Ellie Kemper, Nelson Cruz, Olivia Munn, Eva Green, Michelle Kwan, Kristen Bell, Cece Sabathia, Vanessa Carlton, Chris Pine, Michelle Williams, Mikey Way, Yao Ming, Ben Savage, T.I., Zachary Levi, Nick Cannon, Ben Wishaw, Ashanti, Kim Kardashian, Ben Foster, Luke Hemsworth, a.k.a. the best Hemsworth, Ryan Gosling, Christina Aguilera, Jake Gyllenhaal.
Wow. What a
Deaths. Jesse Owens, Sir Alfred Hitchcock,
wow.
Ian Curtis of Joy Division, Steve McQueen, and John Lennon.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, those are some big names. Yeah. And like you said, Dan, like Hitchcock's in your top 5 as well. So this was kind of the birth of some of these up and coming directors, but also, unfortunately, the end of legend. So, Chad, you're a big music guy too. Are there any albums worth noting in 1980? Oh, you have them in your hand.
Oh yeah, I picked up a couple of the vinyls. So I got "Remain in Light" by Talking Heads. I got "Closer" by Joy Division.
Nice.
He died that year. And I got "Back in Black" by AC/DC.
That's a good one.
"Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables" by Dead Kennedys. "Scary Monsters and Super Creeps" by David Bowie. And then we have "The River" by Bruce Springsteen. And then we have Peter Gabriel, like 3 or something like that it's called. Or just called Peter Gabriel. "Making Movies" by Dire Straits. 17 Seconds by The Cure. And "Permanent Waves" by Rush.
Nice. Wow. Cool. So now let's actually get to the movies themselves. Like Dan listed a bunch of great movies from 1980. Where Chad and I always bring lists also of other movies that didn't make the cut. Dan, were there any more movies worth noting from 1980 that you want to bring up, or were those mostly the main
Well,
ones?
I mean, one of my favorite comedies. I mean, a lot of people, they look at this and then, okay, whatever. But it's actually really funny, and it's called Private Benjamin. And
Oh,
I mean, in some of my honorable mentions, I got the two actresses, the main actress and the supporting actress, in some of my honorable mentions we'll mention later. Love Private Ben. Such a funny movie. A movie I got from Blue Underground back about 10 months ago, back in like March or April, called The Final Countdown. Great movie. I mean, it's like a movie that is about history, but it has a science fiction twist to it, and it's kind of neat, you know. It has really good performances from Kirk Douglas and I think Sheen, not Sheen.
Martin Sheen.
Martin Sheen. Martin Sheen is in it, I believe. Don't quote me on this, people. Don't. But no, I mean, there's a lot of good movies. There's Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Flash. I mean, I freaking love Flash Gordon.
Nice.
Yeah. But there's so many great movies.
Yeah, Chad, do you have any of that on your list, Chad? That you?
Oh yeah, I got a few to note, and then I got two that I think are actually Best Picture worthy. So I got notable films: The Fog, Mad Max, The Changeling, Friday the 13th, as stated. The Return of the King, I think that's the animated one. The Blues Brothers, Airplane, Prom Night, Caddyshack, Dressed to Kill. People talk about Xanadu. I've never seen that one. Mother's Day, Terror Train, Fade to Black, Flash Gordon, Popeye, Stir Crazy. It was a great year for horror, actually.
Yeah.
And then, yes. And then Best Picture worthy, I have Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and The Shining.
Yeah, The Shining, also another big one from that year. And also just for international films, there was a Tarkovsky film, Stalker, which is a pretty renowned film nowadays. Also, Kurosawa did a film called Kagemusha. And also Superman 2 did come out in Australia. It wouldn't come to the US until the next year. And like Chad said, Mad Max was in Australia in 1979, came over to the US in 1980. So a lot of great movies just internationally and domestically. Also, Blues Brothers, another good comedy to add to that list. I mean, Caddyshack, Airplane, Blues Brothers, My Private Benjamin, like that's such a good year for comedy as well. And like you said,
Tricky question. How many cars were destroyed in the final car crash, whatever sequence? Police cars were destroyed. That whole. Now, I heard this a couple years ago, so maybe what I heard was wrong, but give you guys an answer.
This is
what movie is
what
this?
Movie? Blues Brothers.
Blues Brothers. How many police cars or car, whatever, were destroyed
200.
in the whole sequence?
I was gonna say like 40. I didn't think it would be that high, Chad, but I'll go 40. Chad's going 200. What is it, Dan?
Actually, I heard. Now I could put it down in the comments when you watch this episode if I'm wrong, because I heard it was 300.
Wow.
Hey, I was closer.
Yeah, Chad was closer. That's a lot. Wow.
Yeah, I remember watching that movie and thinking, man, there's a lot of cars being crashed.
I should have just did 41 and Price is Right at Dill there.
I don't know, but yeah, like put it down in the comment. If I'm wrong, if you look this up, and you want to make sure you're one of the people like to prove people wrong, go ahead, put it down in the if I'm wrong.
Now I remember Siskel and Ebert when they talked about Siskel put it on his top 10, and Ebert was like, it was just too much for me. It was overblown.
I thought it was too overblown. But if it's funny to have one squad car run into another squad car, it's not necessarily funnier to have 20 squad cars run into 20 other squad cars.
Yeah, some people have different tastes when it comes to how many cars are being destroyed on screen.
Well, I like the bigness of it. I like the bigness of the explosions. I like the bigness of the crashes.
But now let's get into the actual ceremony itself. So the ceremony, there's not a ton to note. Hosted by Johnny Carson, as Dan said, it was in 1981, not 1980, obviously. It was actually postponed today because Ronald Reagan's, the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan was on the 30th, so they pushed it to the 31st of March. There was no acknowledgement for the makeup in The Elephant Man, which then inspired a makeup category that was then introduced the very next year. So this year is the reason why there's still a makeup category today. And just a great year for songs as well. One of the movies, two of them we haven't even mentioned, Fame. The song Fame from Fame wins Best Song. 9 to 5 is that year. From Honeysuckle Rose is nominated for Best Song as well. So that's a good lineup of songs.
On the road again. Just can't wait to get on the road again.
I did make a little chart like I always do of just the precursors headed in. Obviously, there's no PGA or Critics' Choice at the time, but Golden Globes, 3 of these films won big Golden Globes. Coal Miner's Daughter won for Best Musical or Comedy. Raging Bull was nominated but lost to Ordinary People for Best Drama. And then Tess won the International Golden Globe. It is in English, but is technically a United Kingdom production, so it is technically an international feature. And then at the BAFTAs, all of them were snubbed except for Elephant Man, which is a very British film, and it did end up winning the BAFTA for Best Film. I assume just from the chart, the and because Elephant Man and Raging Bull had the most nominations, that was probably suspected to at least be the 2 biggest contenders, and Ordinary People were coming off the Globe. But yeah, it's very interesting, like Dan said, what ended up happening. But let's go film by film now and just talk about these movies first. And then when we get to the movies, obviously we can also talk about the Oscars and the snubbery that Dan was alluding to earlier. But let's start alphabetically with Coal Miner's Daughter. Chad, tell us a little bit about that.
All right, Coal Miner's Daughter, directed by Michael Apted, written by Tom Rickman, cinematography by Ralph D. Bode, not DeBode. Music by Owen Bradley, starring Sissy Spacek, Tommy Lee Jones, Beverly D'Angelo, and Levon Helm. Synopsis: Loretta Lynn goes from being poor and married young to being one of the most influential country stars, based on the novel Coal Miner's Daughter by Loretta Lynn and George Vexey.
Nice. So Dan, I'll ask you first. What are your thoughts on Coal Miner's Daughter? When was the first time you saw it, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I saw it back then when I was a kid, and I'm absolutely blown away by Sissy Spacek as Loretta Lynn. And this is, Raging Bull, and this has really got me into biopics. I absolutely absorb great biopics. There's been some bad biopics over the years. And boy, did we have a great 2021 for biopics. Holy smokes. I mean, it makes me proud, 2021 for the biopics. But Raging Bull and Coal Miner's Daughter, a musician and an athlete. And we started getting a lot of biopics after this. And Tommy Lee Jones, I mean, I obviously I hadn't seen him before that. I've seen him a lot after this. But he was a bit of not the best husband. Sometimes he was good. Sometimes he wasn't good. But Sissy Spacek, we all know her from Carrie, but she sang her own songs in this. She sang the songs, and she sounded like a country music singer. Except the memories of Coal Miner's Daughter. I would not want to, and trust me, I grew up poor. I mean, really poor. I would not have wanted to grow up like she grew up in a hovel, in a holler in Kentucky. Yeah. And the way she was basically taken out of that holler at 14 by Tommy Lee Jones. And by the time she was like 18, she had 4 kids. Yeah. It's like, what the heck is going on? And it wasn't for her skill of being a mute. He buys her on a whim a guitar. And then boom. And then he realizes he's got something there. He's got gold. And so he pushes her and gets this whole thing going. But then, like a lot of musicians, the rigors of the road, of going from town to town, singing for all these people, finally get to her, and she has a breakdown, and it really shows it's a precursor on so many music biopics of the decades previous. If you look at musical biopics since Walk the Line, I mean, there's Ray, I mean, there's so many that seem a little bit like Coal Miner's Daughter, if you ask me.
Yeah, this basically made the template. Like you think about like animation, and Toy Story was kind of like that first invention, and some other movies might be other people's favorites, but like that's the original. This almost feels like the Toy Story for the music biopic. You know what I mean? Like it really feels like it kind of set the trends that nowadays sometimes we criticize biopics for being like, too run of the mill, too by the books, color in the lines. But this was because this kind of set the mold. And so looking at this from a lens of 1980, like this is really impressive. And like you said, Sissy Spacek, the way she's able to go from child to adult, and other films would cast a younger actress and an older actress, but she does it all, which I think is just so impressive, seeing how she is able to grow with the role. And you're totally in belief that she is as young as she is at the start and as old as she is at the end. Like I was never once thinking, oh, she's too old for that role or she's too young for that role at the certain designated times in the film. It was really, really impressive. Chad, do you have any thoughts to add to Coal Miner's Daughter?
Yeah, I actually didn't realize this was a Loretta Lynn biopic until I was like in the middle of it, because I kind of forgot about that part.
Mhm.
But then, like, I don't know. I kind of, for me, like, I kind of just started laughing when I heard that she was 14, because I was like, wait a second, Sissy Spacek is not 14. So, for me, I was like, I don't know about that. So I just started like laughing about that, and then but she sold me as the movie progressed. And yeah, boy, does she have a voice in this. And I love just like her thick Southern accent in the movie.
Mhm.
I really think she like embodied that role, especially as she went on.
Maybe it'll turn to something that'll raise the Titanic someday.
And yeah, Tommy Lee Jones. That I'm sure this dude has just always been old, because he like, he even looks old in this movie. And I'm like,
He
oh,
does
man,
look the
that's
same
bad.
age as he does now.
Didn't have these gags yet, though.
True,
true.
but just like, all right. But yeah, I mean, I feel like they both like played like really great, like complex characters. I don't think Tommy Lee Jones was as good as like, Alexander Skarsgård and Big Little Lies or anything like that. But he definitely was kind of a bastard in this one. And it's kind of interesting to watch this now when we have movies coming out like Licorice Pizza and a lot of like movies that show kind of like a big age gap and
Right.
and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
but this definitely doesn't romanticize it either, which is good.
Oh,
Like,
it definitely doesn't. No.
It definitely shows that it was a very toxic relationship, at least earlier on with the rape scene. It's very hard to watch, and there's some scenes in all these movies that are very tough to watch. It's a very heavy slate at times. This is honestly probably the
Very
lightest
true.
of the 5 movies, and even then, it's got some heaviness to it for sure.
But you don't.
I just need a little more time.
You need a little more time to learn how to love your man the way you're supposed to.
As soon as she got into the studio, she was nervous as all hell. And then, this is where the complex character comes into play for Tommy Lee Jones, is where he actually goes and says, oh, I remember, like, she sings to her babies, and that's what really gets her to open up and, be that great star that I see and they're not seeing right now. And I thought that was like really sweet too.
I just think Apted did a great job going from that holler of Kentucky to the whole world and the traveling around on the bus. And I think, I mean, for him not to get credit for this movie is kind of interesting to me. I really thought obviously we see him in years since doing great work, and it's, I guess maybe this is just maybe his first film or one of his first films he ever did, and he didn't kind of get the recognition for this as much as he could have. But I thought Michael Apted did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, it's interesting because he is the only one of the 5 films that didn't get nominated for Best Director, which is very interesting. I always wonder why the Academy sometimes goes for something in picture. Obviously, nowadays there's more picture nominees than directors, but like would go for something in picture, but then not in director when like the director is kind of in control of the picture. But there are certain elements that come into play. Also it is a movie very rooted in the performance, so maybe some people saw it, and said, "Oh, that's my best picture of the year" because of the performance, but not really taking in mind the director. But I like what you said though about how it kind of travels the countryside and you see all these different areas, and it really gets to the roots of country music in general, which I think is big because I'm not like a huge country music person. I don't know if you guys are, but I don't really not a huge country music person, but this like kind of did remind me of why I do like listening to it sometimes, especially when it's really rooted in that soulfulness and kind of the atmospheric nature of it and kind of sticking to the roots.
They tell the stories in country music, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
Like she told her story. Like if you listen to the songs, she's telling her life story in the songs, and it's kind of like, oh, cool.
Yeah, they were beautiful songs.
Well, I was born to coal miner's daughter.
I did want to shout out just a couple of the cast, because you had Levon Helm, who's actually the lead singer of the band. That's pretty awesome. And then you have Beverly D'Angelo from the Vacation movies playing Patsy Cline.
Yeah, great cast, but especially that leading performance, which, at the end of the show, we will talk about our choice for best actor and actress amongst these 5 films. And that is definitely, I think, in consideration for sure, because the performance is really
Definitely.
what makes this so endearing and enduring the test of time. Coal Miner's Daughter, nominated for 7 Oscars and only wins 1, which is, of course, Best Actress for Sissy Spacek. It's also nominated for Best Picture, for Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Sound, Best Art Direction, which, as we know today, is Production Design, Best Cinematography, and Best Film Editing. So that's Coal Miner's Daughter. We've gone through the countryside. Let's go overseas to England and talk about some David Lynch with The Elephant Man. Chad, why don't you tell us
David
about
Lynch.
The Elephant Man? Yep, there's the shirt.
The Elephant Man, directed by David Lynch, written by Christopher DeVore. This one's actually DeVore. Eric Berggren and David Lynch. Cinematography by Freddie Francis. He would also go on to do cinematography for Dune, David Lynch's Dune. Music by John Morris. Starring Anthony Hopkins, John Hurt, Anne Bancroft, John Gielgud, and Wendy Hiller. Synopsis: a biopic about a severely deformed man in the late 19th century London, John Merrick. Based on the novels The Elephant Man and Other Reminiscences by Frederick Treves, and The Elephant Man, A Study in Human Dignity by Ashley Montague. And then I noted that the score in this movie is fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very fantastic score. Chad, I know you're wearing the David Lynch shirt, so I want to start with you because I know you're a David Lynch fan. This was actually my first David Lynch film ever. Watching for this, so like I know I'm a David Lynch amateur. It's always been on the watch list. Haven't gotten into it, and I've heard this is the most tame. But as a David Lynch fan, Chad, a mega fan, you're wearing a T-shirt. What are your thoughts on this? Because I know you've seen it before, but you revisited it for this, and then I'll get Dan's thoughts after that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is my second watch. I watched it for the first time not that long ago, but this was a really great, revisitation for me. It's interesting because I got the Criterion, and then I started reading a lot about it, and it's just crazy how the whole story about David Lynch getting this movie from producer Mel Brooks because of Eraserhead, but it seems weird, because if you watch Eraserhead, Dill, it's completely bonkers compared to this. So seeing how David Lynch could transition from Eraserhead to this, he couldn't even believe it, and that he would get a movie like this. Yeah. But I love that this movie is, like you said, one of the more tame Lynch films. Yet you still get some great Lynch-isms in there, like the scenes with the woman screaming and the elephants trampling and the industrial machines, and just great shots of that, and the great sounds, and with the score, and then you also have I'm sitting here wondering, how does this movie end? I can't remember. And it's it ends on one of the, best Lynch shots. It's just in space with the woman talking or screaming or something like that. And I'm of course. Okay. That makes perfect sense for a Lynch film. But it's not just all weird, kind of metaphors and abstract, shots of things. This is an actual biopic. I love this movie so much. I adore it because it takes a character. It actually kind of reminded me of this year's Nightmare Alley a little bit, actually. But, this one I adore way more. I think this one actually takes the geek character, the Elephant Man, John Merrick, and, at first they find him, they take him, they're this dude is the most deformed person we've ever seen. We're going to study him. So they look at him behind this curtain. You don't actually see it. You don't actually see him being studied, but you see the silhouette of him. And then, it goes from that to them looking at him at the play or at the musical, whatever he saw. And they're looking at him in a different way as an actual human being. And I think that's why that one book was called something studying in human dignity. And I think that's exactly what this movie is about.
It's funny that you made that parallel to Nightmare Alley because Bradley Cooper actually played the Elephant Man, played John Merrick on the stage version on Broadway a few years ago.
I didn't know
that's
that.
an interesting parallel. Yeah, I didn't
so
see it,
cool.
but I've seen clips and stuff. Dan, what are your thoughts on Elephant Man? Was when was the first time you saw this, and do you like it?
When I was a kid, 1980, I saw this for the first time, and when I was
Nice.
watching the Oscars, I was, I was I was such an emotional state at that time because I thought to myself, how could this movie not be rewarded more? How could Raging Bull not be rewarded more? I mean, what John Hurt does with this character to me is one of the most incredible things you could possibly do in the history of acting.
Oh, she had the face of an angel.
The fact that he has to play a guy that is the most ugliest, gruesome thing on the face of the planet on the outside, and on the inside have the grace and dignity and beauty, inner beauty of just the most beautiful thing on the face of the planet. And that dichotomy of being ugly on the outside and being beautiful on the inside is just one of the most phenomenal performances I ever saw in my entire life. And it happened to be the same year that Robert De Niro was playing Jake LaMotta. And it's a travesty because I feel like if there could have been a tie, I would have been happy with the tie between John Hurt and Robert De Niro because of how phenomenal. But the cinematography, the set production, whatever, production design.
Yeah.
I mean, Lynch learned a lot on Eraserhead that he took into the Elephant Man. To me, he upped the ante for the Elephant Man. And it's just such a beautiful, wonderful, just amazing film.
Mm-hmm.
I just cannot say enough about what an incredible achievement in cinematography and film that David Lynch did. And of course, he does some films after this that I don't know. This is a masterpiece, in my opinion.
Yeah,
an absolute masterpiece.
Yeah, David Lynch's filmography, I think in general, is a little polarizing depending on the way you view it, and it does have a divisive fan base. I think people are either so on board or so off board. I mean, this feels like the most audience accessible, but I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good way to showcase, like Chad said, his sensibilities as a director. His kind of eeriness that he has over the whole film, because it is like this. Not spooky, but it's an eerie tone throughout, but it is at its core a really heartfelt story about someone being accepted and feeling part of a family again. But it is dark as well. It is really dark, and it has its dark moments. I mean, it ends on a very dark but also very sweet moment at the same time, where he is dying, but also like kind of finding peace with that as he's dying. He's not being killed at the hands of the people who've tormented him his whole life. As a first-time Lynch watcher, I was really, really on board with this. I love this. I was just eating up all the different styles and everything. It's a biopic, but it doesn't feel like I think this year especially does such a good job making these biopics feel like character pieces more so than just a biography of, oh, let's just hit every bullet point on the Wikipedia page. It's like it really just dives into who this guy is and his soul and his character rather than, getting beat for beat everything that happened in his life. And it is a little bit loosely interpreted. I know it's not necessarily 100% factually correct, but I don't think a movie has to be unless it is a documentary. This is a biopic. It's a film adaptation. So I think it's a really, really solid one. And the makeup is just astounding too. Like every single scene, and they didn't do one take, so he had to put that makeup on so many times throughout the filming schedule, and that's just really impressive to see that he was able to act through that makeup every single time he was on set and still give a grade A performance. Chad, did you come up with a quote?
Oh yeah, I found it. It's why Mr. Merrick, you're not an Elephant Man at all. Oh no, you're a Romeo.
Oh, Mr. Merrick, you're not an Elephant Man at all. You're Romeo.
And like that one just like hit me to my core because as soon as that happened, me and my wife just looked at each other like, okay, that was ridiculously sweet. And like that is just so sad because he had to go on feeling like a nothing, like, just basically an animal, exactly like an elephant. And not that elephant or animals shouldn't be treated with respect too, but he's treated like nothing, like scum, and then to be built up by these other people, and then only to be brought back down when you have that scene when they take advantage of him again, and you get the circus music coming in, finding the courage to stand up for himself at the end too, with the line I started the show with.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you brought up, that everyone's brought up this idea of like acceptance, because some of these characters are played by actors that in pop culture now we think of as some of the most notorious villains in cinematic history. Anthony Hopkins is Hannibal Lecter, and Bancroft is Mrs. Robinson, but here they are very endearing people. They're very accepting people, and they kind of have the heart and soul of the film, because it's important to also get that audience lens into this guy's life rather than just seeing everything from his perspective. It's important to see that there are other bystanders around, that he's not alone, that there are people also around him. I just think it's very well-rounded, very enjoyable, and I don't think anyone who's off-put or turned off a little bit by Lynch's later works cannot enjoy this one, because I think, like I said, it is so audience accessible. And like Dan said, it doesn't win a single Oscar. And I think that's also a travesty considering the craft. And that is why they made a makeup category, because I guarantee if there was one, he would have won. I mean, it probably would have been close because there's another movie that has great makeup as well. But this one definitely, takes the cake for makeup. But it is nominated for Best Picture, Director for David Lynch, Best Actor for John Hurt, Best Adapted Screenplay, Costume Design, Art Direction, Film Editing, Best Score. Like Chad said, the score is beautiful. I mean, so many categories that's nominated for, doesn't win a single one. But there is one film that ends up winning 4 awards. It's one we alluded to earlier. Let's talk about it.
Ordinary People, directed by Robert Redford, who actually founded the Sundance that we've been watching, all this stuff. That's so cool. Written by Alvin Sargent, cinematography by John Bailey, music by Marvin Hamlish, starring Donald Sutherland, Mary Tyler Moore, Judd Hirsch, and Timothy Hutton. Synopsis: following the accidental death of one of its sons and the attempted suicide of the other, an upper middle class family starts to disintegrate. Based on the novel Ordinary People by Judith Guest.
Yeah. So obviously this is the Best Picture winner of the year. We'll talk about the other awards it won later on. But Dan, you seem to have some thoughts on this Oscar win and this film in general. So why don't you give your thoughts on what you thought of this film, especially in regards to winning Best Picture?
Look, I want to preface this by saying maybe 1980 was a groundbreaking film in the year 1980. But today, since 1980, we've seen movies such as Doing Time on Maple Drive, American Beauty. Every week we're watching This Is Us, or these kinds of dramatic TV shows or movies about people with trauma, people with depression, people with domestic abuse, and so forth. So it's become just haphazard, or like we're just used to this type of thing. For me, growing up, I didn't have anything like this of an upbringing. I grew up poor. I grew up in the most awful place you could possibly imagine. We ate paint off the walls. We were so hungry, which gave me lead poisoning. I've been poor my entire life. So this is some kind of idyllic life where these people have all these cars and a beautiful house and nice clothes. The guy's got a nice job in Chicago. Timothy Hutton obviously does give a phenomenal performance as this kid, but boo-hoo. Okay, so your parents don't love you. So who gives a crap? You know how many kids out there, their parents don't love them? They're alcoholics or they're drug addicts or whatever. Every town and every state and all over America, we have all kinds of domestic problems and problems with families all over the country. This is nothing new. This is just ridiculous, if you ask me, that this movie won Best Picture. And Robert Redford, one of my favorite actors of all time, won Best Director. I love him. He should not have won Best Director. Ordinary People should not have won Best. Come on, man. Give me a break with this movie. There's some phenomenal movies in this list. Coal Miner's Daughter, Raging Bull, Elephant Man, Tess are all superior movies to Ordinary People. This is ridiculous that this movie was even involved in this kind of stuff. Yes, does Timothy Hutton, first Oscar nomination, first Oscar win. Look at the rest of his career. Does he even come close to this? No, he doesn't. He got the role of a lifetime. He shouldn't even been nominated in Best Supporting. He was a Best Actor. He was the main character in the movie, not the parents, Donald Sutherland, Mary Tyler Moore. I mean, granted, I understand how this might affect some people, this movie. But it just you obviously grew up in a nice family. You grew up in a nice life. You have a beautiful. I did not. So this movie is just like crap to me. This isn't the normal life.
Yeah, that's very interested to hear like a perspective of someone from a different lifestyle, like having an interpretation of this film, because I was watching this film and I didn't really think about the actual like ideas of class in it, but you bring up a good point. It's that it's a very heartbreaking story about this family falling apart, but they do have so much good in their lives as well. So this tragedy obviously separates them apart, but there are still other aspects of their family that are strong, and it's not like a coal miner's daughter where she's starting from bare bones, she's starting from nothing. So I get that perspective. I honestly, watching this, I definitely liked a lot more than you did, Dan, but I didn't really understand the best picture hype, obviously, because it's, you think of the best picture, this is a very small film. It feels almost like what would be an independent film today. But I do think the performances, like you said, they are pretty good. And especially these actors who were mostly known for comedy, like Mary Tyler Moore and Donald Sutherland and Judd Hirsch, doing this dramatic work with one another. I think there are definitely some really great scenes in this, and I think for a directorial debut, it's pretty impressive. Obviously, it's a very, very stacked slate of movies, as we've already talked about 2 of them, and we're going to talk about 2 more after this. But I actually enjoy this one. I think this is one that I think having a different perspective just in life can give you a different perspective on the movie, especially family life. I never had a family life that was like this. I was very fortunate to never lose a family member, never have parents that were, on the fringe of splitting up because of it, never this resentment. But I can understand some people connecting to it because of that, those big themes of, a parent resenting a child, which you never want to imagine, but is true. Tragedy can do that. Tragedy can bring in the ugliness in you. And I think Mary Tyler Moore's character especially has such an interesting arc, because in public she's this very cheeky, smiley, like, oh hey, how you doing, long time no see, let's catch up, when she's at the mall, and then you see her get to the top of the escalator and she just kind of like, you see her face immediately change. There's this wave that just kind of rushes over her of just like, oh, now I'm back to myself and my life that I hate so much because my favorite son died and my other son gets to survive and then tries to kill himself, which is so unfair and cruel to do, considering his brother can't come back. It brings up definitely some deep themes, and like you said, we have seen a lot of it repeated in some other films. But I think also, like Coal Miner's Daughter, I think being one of the first to talk about these issues and to talk about therapy as a way of healing is one of the reasons why I think Ordinary People should get a little bit more credit, just because I think it's one of the first to do what it did, even though we have seen so much of what happened after. But it's very interesting to hear different perspectives. Chad, where do you lean on the fence? Are you positive? Are you more negative? Or are you positive on the film but negative on the fact that it got as much praise as it did?
Well, I think I don't want to tip my hand for ranking, but I just want to say I really actually adored this film. So like, yeah, I come from it from a different perspective, I guess, from Dan. While I respect everything that Dan said, it makes me think of it in a new light, but I kind of like think of it like, as he was talking about like the different, like the class differences, I kind of feel like it actually maybe might aid it for me a little more thinking about that, because it's like, oh yeah, they were kind of like a rich family, and it's kind of like, well, maybe any family can go through this, no matter like what kind of means they have. Everyone has feelings and emotions and stuff like that. But yeah, I actually second what you said, Dill, because Dan made a really good point saying that there's a lot of like really great stuff nowadays that are kind of like this, but I do think it might be kind of a testament to it that it was one of the first to do something like this. I mean, it was kind of Good Will Hunting before Good Will Hunting. It was Inside Out before Inside Out. And it actually took this character, the son, who's so, just like emotionally destructive. He wants to kill himself, has a friend who commits suicide. And then, he's basically, hanging on the edge. He feels like his parents don't like him. His dad's kind of a pushover. His mom he doesn't think likes him at all. Like you said, favorite son was not him. And, so they're basically all just trying to hang on by a thread.
Which is a very interesting perspective too, because there are those people who are like trying to please everyone and trying to hold the family together, and he eventually breaks at the end. You see that moment of him crying at the table.
Yeah,
it's gut wrenching because it's like, that's so honest to what happens, and when you have two ends at odds, and you have to kind of be the middleman, and sometimes you can't mend the bond that was severed.
Because I don't know if I love you anymore.
I do think it deserves a lot of the credit that it got.
Look, I would have given anything for Donald Sutherland for a father. How about growing up with a father who's an alcoholic who takes his paychecks and goes out drinking, comes back with $100, and you got 4 kids at home? How about having a new job every 2 weeks? I would have given anything to have that house, that car, that life, the clothes, the kid. The kid's a swimmer. He quits the swimming team. Give me a break. I came that close to making the basketball team, and it was like a punch in the face to me, because I thought, well, I accomplished something. I could have made the basketball team. I mean, Timothy Hutton gives a phenomenal performance, but boo-hoo, oh, some things are going wrong in your life. Your friends don't like you anymore. Oh, your mother doesn't like you. She likes your other brother. Give me a break. How about having to eat paint off the wall and starve yourself to death because you don't have any food? Then come back and tell me Timothy Hutton's character. Who names their kid Conrad anyway?
The family, the Conrad Birdie, and by the way, Birdie's the only other one I've heard. But yeah, it's interesting because also like that reminds me of like the fact that Mary Tyler Moore's character basically has that kind of sentiment toward her son. It's like, you have so much. Why are you doing this? Like, why should we aid and pay so much attention and love to you when you're just willing to throw it all away? Like, I get that idea, and Mary Tyler Moore is kind of the one being like the boo-hoo toward her son, and then Donald Sutherland's like, oh, but he's our son, and she's like, so what?
You better make sure that your kids are good and safe. And then you come to me and tell me how to be happy.
But then there's also that idea of him being like, but you're also my mom, and I want you to love me and respect me. So I get how like having a different perspective just on life in general can put you in the shoes of these different characters, or put you totally on the outside of them looking in, and how that can definitely gauge the viewing experience. And that's very interesting. And I'm interested to now go back and watch, if I ever go back and watch this, watch it with that lens of someone who can't necessarily relate to any sort of family dynamic similar to this one, or just someone who just has a mindfulness of where these characters are coming from and the stuff they have, and just privilege. I think we're talking a lot about it with just films in regards to race these days, of just what it means to have privilege just racially. And then I think it's important to look at these films and understand privilege in terms of class as well. I think it's a great point you brought up, Dan, because some people respond strongly to things that they either can't relate to, or they think are being unfairly portrayed, when there are other minorities or other groups of people who are feeling much worse things or dealing with bigger problems. But I also think, like Chad said, this is still a kid and his mental health, and mental health kind of doesn't have a class or a gender or race. Mental health is important for everyone, and I think this is a very important film about mental health for someone who might be suffering. Just a matter of obviously whether or not you connect to the experiences themselves, and what your perspective is, that could aid your enjoyment for sure. But I like how we had this interesting discussion, because I think that's what sometimes the best films or even the worst films do, is they just like have compelling discussions around them. And Ordinary People's nominated for 6 nominations and wins 4 awards. It wins Best Picture, Best Director, like Dan said, Robert Redford. It wins Best Supporting Actor for Timothy Hutton, who was not really in the public eye for a while, but he did kind of make a little bit of a resurgence with Haunting of Hill House. And then Best Adapted Screenplay, and also nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Judd Hirsch and Best Actress for Mary Tyler Moore. One other snub, Donald Sutherland, not nominated, which is also still kind of regarded as one of the bigger Best Actor snubs of all time, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. So now let's transition to the film that got beat. It got punched down, it got knocked out in the boxing ring, but it still managed to get up with 2 wins. That is Raging Bull. Chad, why don't you tell us about Raging Bull?
Here we go. Raging Bull, directed by Martin Scorsese, written by Paul Schrader and Mardik Martin, cinematography by Michael Chapman. I don't know if there was a score. I didn't see a music thing there. Starring Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Kathy Moriarty, Nicholas Colasanto, Teresa Saldana, and Frank Vincent. Synopsis. An Italian middleweight boxer's self-destructive rage, sexual jealousy, and animalistic appetite destroys his relationship with his wife and family. Based on the novel Raging Bull, My Story by Jake LaMotta, Joseph Carter, and Peter Savage.
Cool. Yeah, so obviously this is a very well-renowned film, definitely making a lot of people's like top 100s and the AFI top 5. Yeah, it's one I had never seen until now, so it was very interesting. So many films passed me by, and this was just one that just was always on the list. I never got around to, and I finally got around to it, and I have some thoughts. But Dan, I want to throw it over to you first because I know this is one of your favorite films, and just you have talked a lot about it already, just in regards to the Oscars and the way it lost to Ordinary People and Best Actor against John Hurt. But what are your thoughts on the film itself, and tell us why you love this film?
Bring my steak over. Bring it over. Bring it over. You're burning my steak. Give me my fucking steak. What the fuck are you doing? That right there, to me, encapsulates Raging Bull. He can't even get a steak without having an absolute blow up against his first wife in the movie. And then he goes after his brother. I don't know what you guys are allowed to say on here, what you're not allowed to say, so I apologize. But
no, yeah, go ahead.
Are you fucking my wife? Are you fucking my wife? I mean, how powerful is this? He is so wrapped up in his own head that he just cannot get out of his mind the fact that maybe his brother might have had a relationship with his wife before he married his wife. Because he is such an awful human being. He's the most ugly, human, angry, sadistic human being you can imagine. The only way to get his anger out is to go in the boxing ring and absolutely destroy his opponents. He fought Sugar Ray Robinson 6 times. And you know what he said at the last time he fought Sugar Ray? You never got me down, Ray. You never got me down. This, to me, is a depiction of reality in society, of what there are in life, the types of people there are in life. This guy reminded me of my own father, my own life growing up, the anger, the fights, the just alcoholism, the whole 9 yards of myself. The black and white, absolutely perfect way to film this movie. There is a score. Just listen to the end credits and the beginning credits. You'll know there's a score in this movie. The fact that he can't get out of his own way, the fact that he ruins his own career despite himself, by betting. And then you have phenomenal performances by Joe Pesci, Frank Vincent, Kathy Moriarty. I mean, the framing sequences where he's going on stage, this whole give me a stage where this bull can rage.
The Bronx Bull, the Raging Bull. Let's hear for the great Jake LaMotta, ladies and gentlemen.
Martin Scorsese was in a bad place when just before he made this film. Robert De Niro brought this to him and said, hey, we need to make this. And he didn't want to make this movie. And he begged him to make it. He says, this is great. And Paul Schrader, I mean, I absolutely love him as a director. He hasn't directed as many films. He directed one this year, actually, The Card Counter. He directed one a couple years ago, the first one, but he also wrote Taxi Driver. He wrote this. He wrote, he's wrote Affliction with Charles Bro. God, somebody Affliction. Just look up Affliction. You'll understand what Nick Nolte and what a great script. But the editing by Thelma Schoonmaker. Oh my God, she wins an Oscar for this. But the editing is amazing. There's so much stuff going on. And the cinematography, it's just an amazing, amazing film. But it's a microcosm about real people in real life. Yeah. People aren't happy. People are not in a good place. This is the 60s or whatever it was, the 50s, the 60s, whatever. And you could just see what a miserable, the neighbors yelling at them and stuff. They're, it reminded me of my own life growing up as a kid with a father that was an absolute awful human being back then.
Definitely. Yeah, it's interesting because this is almost like the antithesis of the Elephant Man. It's like the Elephant Man's like the ugliness on the outside and then the warmth and goodness in the inside. This is more like the charming outside. He's going around kissing, 18-year-old girls on the mouth in the bar, and he's this charming guy, but then it's like, no, on the inside, there's this raging bull, and the raging bull is not in the boxing ring. I think, honestly, the boxing stuff itself is the least important stuff in the movie. I think it's all the other stuff, and it's him being this raging bull in these streets, in the relationships with his family. That's the real raging bull, is himself, and what he is bringing to his everyday relationships and everyday lives. Honestly, I've seen many Scorsese films. I think I just had this so overhyped that like I'd probably go back and enjoy other Scorsese films more just because they're either easier watches, they're better paced maybe, but this one I think definitely has a lot of the most rich substance to it for sure. I think there's a lot in this film that you could dissect, and I think I almost want to give it another watch to really just get to the core of what it's saying fully, because I was kind of watching this, I was a little cold to it at first because these aren't likable characters. It's really hard to cling on to a character that you relate to, even the brother and the girlfriend who you do still kind of root for in the fight against him. They do things that get him riled up. There's a reason why he gets mad at them. He did sleep with the wife, his brother did sleep with his wife, and she did do things to hurt him too, and it's just a lot of just toxicity all over the place. It's honestly like Ordinary People, just set in a totally different realm and class and atmosphere. It's these people who are just going at each other with their in Ordinary People it's their words. Here it's their their fists. It gets violent, but not typical Scorsese violent. Like there's not a lot of guns. It's more just the pure fists and shoving people in the cabinets and going to your house and knocking you out of your chair while you're eating dinner. It's heavy. And I think this is a watch that I don't think I can watch a lot. Dan, do you find yourself revisiting this a lot, or is it just because for me, I think it would be hard to rewatch just because it is so tough and heavy. But do you find yourself rewatching it, or is it just one of those things where you appreciate the film a lot, but it's a once in every few years type watch because it's
I watch it every year.
There you go.
Clockwork.
Wow.
I mean, the fact that he would alienate his own brother because of potential that he could have slept with his wife years ago, when she was young, and these sexual relationships. Mary, his first wife was 15. The girls in the bar at the end are 14. This is when age really wasn't really a big thing, because we already talked about coal miner's daughter. She was 14 years old. She marries an adult man and has 4 children by the time she's 18. This is what women did back then. My mother had 4 children by the time she was 18. She was trying to raise 4 kids. My father was just an angry, bad father. Right. But I watch this movie every year because it just reminds me of where I come from and what my life was like and who my parents are. And it helps me remember the struggles that I've had growing up and that I continue to have.
Yeah, it's a very interesting perspective. Yeah, Chad, what's your perspective on this film? Because I know you've seen it before, or you haven't.
Yeah. This was definitely a rewatch for me, but the first time I watched it was a very long time ago, and it's really interesting to hear Dan talk about his thoughts on this because his personal growing up affected his viewing of Ordinary People. It affected it in a very different way in this film, and I think that's like super important for because like there's movies I don't have anything on the top of my head, and shows that I absolutely adore because of how they affect me personally as well. So I think that's amazing to hear. Dan, thank you for sharing all of that. But as far as Scorsese goes in general, I'm not known to be the biggest Scorsese fan. I know you guys are huge Scorsese fans compared to me. But I have been growing as a Scorsese fan. I think a lot of his mob films are kind of like the ones I don't like as much. I like when he branches out and does other stuff. So like this one, I thought watching second time I was going to adore because of so many people, kind of like prop this up. And I think they should, because I do think it's a very great, well-made film. I don't think I enjoyed it that much myself either. I think I kind of am on the same fence as you, Dill, where I might want to watch this 1 or 2 more times to kind of, see the brilliance that Dan sees in it, because, for me, it is a great performance, but it is just like, there was no character. I mean, I guess I could identify with Joe Pesci a little bit, kind of having a crazy monster for a brother. Yeah, I just love Joe Pesci in general.
Yeah, he's great in this.
But yeah, he's absolutely great in this. But I think with this film, I don't know, there just wasn't enough for me to actually latch on to for my actual personal enjoyment. I think it's one of those, exactly, like, I know it's a very great, well-made film that a lot of people love. It's definitely on AFI for a reason. My personal enjoyment, I don't know. I think I liked it more maybe the first time I watched it for some reason. And then this time I was like, oh, Raging Bull, I'm going to love this one. And I think maybe because there are some other ones from this year that I watched that I actually liked a lot more, that it kind of actually knocked it down a peg a little bit. And I think that actually might be similar for Dan, just the opposite.
Yeah. Well,
So
it's also one of those things where, yeah, like if a film does kind of like a film like this does leave you a little cold, I think it's also kind of doing its job in a way, because it's meant to
True.
be cold. It's meant to be this really grisly, dark, and like Dan said, the black and white really complements that well. But
True.
when talking about favorite versus best, I think you could make a whole different ranking for like what you think is the actual best film versus what is your
Absolutely.
favorite, because like both of us have said, Chad, like it's hard to watch this film. It's a heavy watch.
Mhm.
And Dan, I think you could also agree it's like it's definitely a heavy watch, but obviously because of your personal ties, it definitely does have rewatch value. And that's what's just so amazing about Martin Scorsese's filmography. Like Chad said, like he does branch out so much, so there is a lot to cling on to. If you're not into the gangster stuff, there's stuff like this, which is similar in the sense of like toxic masculinity. It's like a bro movie. It's like dark. It's about men and their anger, but it's also through the sports lens. And then you have even stuff like Hugo, which is like a children's film. It's light, it's fun,
Last
it's
Temptation of
energetic.
Christ.
Yeah, exactly. Just so many
Silence.
different branches. Silent. Yeah, exactly. There's just so
Yeah.
many different.
Silence. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And even Wolf of Wall Street, which is kind of a mix of everything, but all together rather light in comparison. But yeah, I do want to talk really quickly, like Dan said, about Thelma Schumacher. Her editing is what won the Oscar next to Robert De Niro, and I think it's worth noting because she has not been awarded nearly as much as she should be, and she is, I think, his resident editor. I believe she's edited almost every movie, if not every movie.
Nice.
Dan, but Dan, do you want to talk about that editing anymore? Because it's such a
Well,
good job
look,
of editing. Yeah.
he actually did something that nobody else had these crane shots where he had the crane shots over the ring, and he filmed the boxing scenes in ways that you now become it's second nature for directors to use these crane shots and some of the ways that he filmed the ring, and then
Yeah, it's like Citizen Kane inventing so many different styles of cinematography and being so influential.
In the boxing shots were just, he got them to where he was circling the ring. You could see the camera circling the ring, and that was a lot of the editing, because these scenes were just long, drawn out scenes of boxing matches, and you had to kind of cut these down, and then just all kinds of different techniques for filming. So he had to get some editing, and she really edits the fighting scenes very, very well here. And
yeah, it's definitely one you could use like in a textbook to teach a class about how to construct a movie in general. It definitely is. It's got such a power to it. Any last things? Yeah. Chad.
Also, shout out to Evil Dead 2 for great filmmaking innovation.
Yes. Yeah, so many great films that shaped the landscape of cinema. Raging Bull nominated for 8 nominations, wins twice, wins for Best Actor for Robert De Niro, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later also. Best Film Editing, and then nominated for Best Picture Director for Martin Scorsese, Supporting Actor for Joe Pesci, Supporting Actress for Kathy Moriarty, Best Sound, and Best Cinematography. Speaking of cinematography, why don't we talk about the last film of our lineup and the one that won Best Cinematography? That is Roman Polanski's Tess. Chad, take it away.
All right, Tess, directed by Roman Polanski, written by Gerard Brack, John Brown, that's a name, and Roman Polanski. Cinematography by Ghislaine Cloquet and Jeffrey Unsworth. Music by Philippe Sard, starring Nastasia Kinski, Peter Firth. What? Natasha?
It'd be Natasha Kinski.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Peter Firth, Lee Lawson, John Collin, Rosemary Martin, and some others. Synopsis. A girl named Tess is courted and sexually assaulted, which ruins her life.
Yeah, very interesting history behind this film. Obviously, we all know Roman Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate, murdered in the Manson murders, and this was the book that she gave him supposedly on the last day he saw her before she died. Said, "I would like you to make this into a movie," and he did. And it's very unlike a lot of the other films that he's done. Obviously, the elephant in the room, not going back to Elephant Man, but the elephant in the room being that Roman Polanski himself. Obviously, the controversies that have come about him. I don't want to get too much into that, but I think that is an interesting tidbit to keep in mind, just knowing what kind of story this is. This is a story about a woman overcoming sexual assault, but also having other relationships that are healthy, but then become unhealthy, but then resolve again. But then she goes to great measures to then unravel it herself. It is a very complex film. It's almost 3 hours. The original cut was longer than 3 hours in Germany. The cut now, you can't find anything longer than 3 hours to a version of it. Maybe you can. I couldn't, but yeah, very, very interesting film. Dan, what are your thoughts on this film? Are you, is this one you also saw when you were younger or when you were a little older?
No, actually, I saw Tess for the first time today.
Oh, wow.
Of all the nominees, I missed this one,
Okay.
but I was absolutely blown away with it
Mhm.
when I watched it this morning. I watched it in one sitting, and you know a comparison to the 5 films that we're talking about. This is a absolutely gorgeous woman on the outside, and on the inside, she's just being torn apart because she just wants happiness. She wants to be loved by somebody. And it just, I mean, wow, what an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous film. The set pieces, the clothes, the muck, like they're going in the fields and getting potatoes, and it's like, wow, they are just going dirty, down and dirty to get the right kind of feel for this film. And it was like, this woman is gorgeous. She should be getting the best of everything. She thinks she's royalty or some kind of whatever. And it turns out, everything just turns bad for her, and it's just absolutely awful what happens to this woman throughout her life. And I just thought Natasha Kinski was amazing. The direction is incredible. I mean, wow, what an absolute gorgeous movie to look at.
Yeah, it definitely is long, and I think it almost adds to the feeling being so long and really drawn out. All these long takes, and there's a kind of a big atmosphere. Everything's shot in daylight. It's almost like Nomadland. Everything feels very open, but also her story is incredibly personal. It's very closed in. It's very internal, whereas everything else around her going on is very big, and I think it's a great dichotomy there. Just seeing how she's containing everything in. I mean, all these movies, all 5 of them, are dealing with protagonists or main characters who are dealing with so much on the inside that they can't necessarily show outside, or vice versa in the Elephant Man's sake. But like the idea of having to keep all the utter turmoil inside, and she plays it. Natasha Kinski plays it so well, just keeping that facade up because she really can't let herself break, because this is at a time where rape was considered seduction. It was just, oh, he's seducing you, and nowadays you look at it and you're like, no, like this is like very, very a big issue. Yeah, and I think even the people who
we had
the
this
man
in 3 of the films.
Yes, the man that ends up coming around to her, which is Angel, even him who ends up with her at the end, does do something very shitty as well. He kind of confesses that he had a love, and then she confesses that she used to be married, and then he's like, well, I can't accept you.
I mean,
it's the same exact scenario, but I can't be with you, and then leaves her for someone else, and it's just, even the good characters are bad in this, and it just shows that it's very hard. It's a very hard world to navigate, especially at the time period here for a woman, especially a beautiful woman, because the men think that they're prey. Like you said, it's like a predator prey situation. Everyone's trying to get their hands on this, and it's a person, it's a human being. She has a baby at one point. She has a family that she ends up going back to her rapist to care for her family, to support her mother and her siblings, and it's very heartbreaking watch. I mean, it's a very tough watch, and I think this is not the type of movie you can watch 30 times a year. It's not like something you can just throw on the TV. It's something you really have to like prepare yourself for and sit down and soak it all in. But yeah, I really enjoyed it too on this first watch. Chad, what are your thoughts on Tess?
Yeah, I mean, like this one is it's just very interesting, like the way, you guys watched this movie. For me, because I've had so much to do recently, moving, watching Sundance films, stuff like that, I just haven't had a ton of time to actually sit down and like watch a 3-hour movie from beginning to end. I should have watched this one maybe first before I started doing all of this. So I actually watched this one in chunks, which I think is probably, hearing what Dan said, not the best way to view this one. And so I think for me, I did like this movie. I didn't love it. And I think it's probably because I had to break it up because it's the longest one out of the bunch.
Yeah.
And however, hearing you guys talk about it makes me see it in definitely a different light. Watching it, I do have the whole Roman Polanski stuff in my head as it's going on, as I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And then, I did really feel for Tess. I felt like it was just, she was dealt a bad hand. Bad things happen to her, and then it affects the rest of her life. She can't have like a normal relationship anymore. And then it doesn't even end well for her. And so
the one time she takes her matters into her own hands ends up being the thing that does her in eventually.
Exactly. And it is, just like a tragic downfall of a character. I will say it's definitely a beautiful looking movie. It sounds great, but I think that if I can give it the time to actually watch it 3 hours all in one sitting, I mean, I can do it, but
yeah, it's interesting that you said like the Roman Polanski stuff is in the back of your mind, because when I read the synopsis, I was like, oh, Roman Polanski doing a movie about women being sexually assaulted and like trying to overcome that. I was like, this just seems like the wrong fit. But then when you read like kind of the context of it being for Sharon, and he opens it with the for Sharon, and it kind of hits you in the heart. You're like, oh wow, like he's making this from a much more personal standpoint. Like the murder in this film, in any other Polanski film might have been a lot more grotesque, but here it's just one drop of blood. You see one drop of blood, and it's like, it's that idea that like he is in a totally different zone making this movie, and it feels like his most personal because of it, and it honestly feels like his most endearing. And he, obviously everything that's going on with him personally aside, just in terms of filmmaking itself, he it's a very endearing picture considering his other works he's done as well, and the way he just made it as an ode to his wife, and he does take the time because he does want to be faithful to the adaptation. And I like what you said, Chad, about you like watching it in chapters, because I think it's also interesting to look at in chapters, because the first chapter, it's her growing up and having this rapist who is awful to her and her getting away from him. Second chapter is her love and then finding that love go away, and that third chapter is where she really starts to come into her own and kind of almost go too far, to ends up being her own demise. And it's a really interesting 3-act structure that went together is really impactful. But even on in chapters and chunks, like it definitely feels like you could watch 3 separate movies of its own trilogy, 3-hour-long installments of this. But very interesting. Dan, are you very familiar with Roman Polanski's work? Like, where does this rank amongst his other works for you?
Well, for me, I mean, this is one of the highest ones now after having watched it for the first time.
Sure.
What Chinatown is, forget about it. I mean, I absolutely love Chinatown. I mean, I can't wait for the movie about making Chinatown that's coming out based on that book, and we're getting that movie based on the book about making China, this whole thing. So I can't wait for that. That's going to be interesting. Look. And some friends of ours will absolutely disagree with me, but I will tell you this. I am one of those people that will use baseball, since I'm wearing a baseball hat. Look, Pete Rose was one of the greatest hitters of all time, and I can separate what Pete Rose did on the field with what he did as a manager, gambling on the Cincinnati Reds. To me, you can't take away all those hits that he got. What he did as a manager had nothing to do with the hits that he got. Roman Polanski made a mistake, did something wrong, had to go to Europe. Now he lives in Europe. He makes a piece of art that is absolutely beautiful about a tragic woman who's on the outside the most gorgeous thing you can imagine, and on the inside she's in so much pain because all she wants is happiness. All we want in life is happiness.
Yeah.
Could we please have some happiness in life? And she couldn't have happiness no matter what things happened to her. And to me, it's one of the best things Roman Polanski ever directed.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how you talk about like separating the art from the artist, and especially looking at something that happened a while ago. You know, this is a personal story. He did this after the loss of his love, and you almost can kind of use that as a way of looking at this almost autobiographically, in the sense that maybe he is one of those men, not maybe the first man, but maybe the second one, maybe the one who was so in love, but something about him made him leave and made him kind of be absent to the one that he loved, and then him coming around at the end to say, you know what, I do want to be with you. I was wrong, and I do want this life with you. And then she does something that takes her away. So it could be kind of, I don't know if this is true, but autobiographical to his own experiences of, you know, having this wife, but, you know, letting the Hollywoodness of it all consume him, and then doing what he did personally, but then losing Sharon Tate and what that meant to him. I can definitely see maybe a parallel there with how he, you know, writes this angel character to maybe be a representation of him and his own relationship. And he kind of sees Sharon as this Tess character, because he wanted to cast Sharon Tate as Tess when he got the book, and he was like, yeah, I could adapt this and she should be Tess. And I think there's something to say about just his personal life influencing the decisions of the characters and the way, you know, those romances are formed, because it is a very tricky romance. The first one obviously is very wrong. You know, there's really no right about that relationship, but the second one, there is nuance, there is highs and lows, and it's a very complicated relationship. And I think that's one that, you know, can be reflective of that. So I think it's interesting.
And think about it. If the father doesn't happen upon some guy who says, you know, why I'm calling you sirs, because you're part of the D'Urbervilles. You're not part of the Derby Fields. You're part of the D'Urbervilles. And then that makes him realize, oh, wait, we could be royalty. So she goes to, none of this would have happened if that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
she would have just been living her life in squalor like she would have normally lived and whatnot. And Ted, all this stuff happens because of that.
Yeah, it's not even the romantic men in her life, but it's also like the other men in her life, like her father, that, you know, kind of push her around and make her do the things she's doing, and it ends up mostly being tragic, ultimately being tragic. But yeah, the craft also, like we've talked about, is just gorgeous. It almost reminded me, Chad, of when we watched Barry Lyndon, just like every shot being like just amazed by, you know, it's a period piece, but you know, it feels so much more. It feels like you're actually there, you know, witnessing all these beautiful shots and stuff. So
I definitely saw a lot of the parallels between this and Barry Lyndon. And I also wanted to add that I definitely agree with everything Dan said about, you know, separating the art from the artist, because I do that all the time myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very interesting conversation to have. And if you don't, that's fine too. Like, comment below, because I think there are definitely people who will look at this as like oh my God, how dare he of all people make a movie like this? And I think it's very interesting to see the people who are like, oh, it's just a movie. The people who are like, yeah, no, that's wrong. He shouldn't be making this movie. And then the people who are able to say, yeah, he's making this movie, but also a lot of this movie is about how, you know, shitty maybe he was to his own wife, or how much he loved her despite being absent and wanting to kind of rekindle that, but not being able to, and this kind of being a way of healing in that sense. And
would it be, Dylan, would the word meta be a good word for this? Or
could
no?
be, yeah. No, I mean,
this
maybe
is meta before meta became a thing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's a director who is suffering, or not suffering. I don't want to say suffering because he did some bad things, but like experiencing a lot of, you know, things in his life that he can then bring to his art, and is making a movie about similar things. It's about, you know, predators and the stuff that he is being shamed for himself on the media. It's a very interesting meta-ness for sure. And Tess, nominated for 6, wins 3, so it's batting 500. Ordinary People had the best record, 4 out of 6, but this was 3 out of 6. This is pretty good too. Wins costume design, art direction, and cinematography. Nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Roman Polanski, and Best Original Score. So yeah, a very good crop of films. Some great, some really great, but I think we all agree there's no bad film of the bunch. Maybe Dan has his, you know, thoughts on Ordinary People.
I gave Ordinary People 3 stars. I downgraded from 4 to 3.
All right, so that's still three out of 5 is still better than 2.5. That's still better than a halfway point. So now what we do on the show is we rank them from top to bottom. So this will definitely be interesting because we all, some of us are experiencing these movies for the first time,
Bottom
or
to
the
top.
400th time. Did I say top to bottom? I meant bottom to top. We've written them out top to bottom, but now we're going to announce them bottom to top.
Yeah.
Dan, you're the guest. Why don't you start us off? What is your number 5 in this ranking?
Best picture? The best picture?
Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
Number 5, Ordinary People.
Yep.
You heard me say it all. I don't have to go into a whole diatribe. I already said we ain't gonna be here all night doing this. It's number 5.
Yep. Chad, what's your number 5?
I'm going back and forth in my mind between my 4 and my 5, but I will cement Tess as my number 5.
All right, and my number 5, I really didn't dislike any of these films. This is just the weakest of the 5 for me, and that is Coal Miner's Daughter is my number 5. So Dan, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is The Coal Miner's Daughter.
All right, Chad, what is your number 4?
I'm gonna break hearts. I'm gonna put Raging Bull at number 4.
That's fine. And my number 4.
Yeah, I know. I got the glare.
my number 4. It's all subjective. My number 4 is Ordinary People. Dan, what is your number 3?
Tess.
All right. Chad, what is your number 3?
Coal Miner's Daughter.
All right. And my number 3 is Raging Bull. So Dan, what is your number 2?
The Elephant Man.
Elephant Man. Chad, what is your number 2?
Number 2, Ordinary People.
And my number 2 is Tess, which means, Dan, your number 1 is?
Raging Bull.
Chad, your number 1?
The Elephant Man.
And my number 1 is also The Elephant Man. So I believe if we add up these totals, Elephant Man is mine and Chad's number 1 and Dan's number 2. So I believe Elephant Man, by commonality, is our best picture of 1980. Again, you can't go wrong with any of these choices, but The Elephant Man is the one that had the commonality. How do you guys feel about that? Does that feel like a worthy representation of all 3 of our?
Makes me happy.
I would have been happy with Elephant Man winning the actual Academy Award in 1981.
Same.
Best picture over Ordinary People as a 7-year-old.
Same.
Cool. So now what we do is we award our best actor and best actress for these 5 films. But also, Dan, because you have seen some of these other 1980 films, if you want to also give a shout out to maybe one of the other performances that wasn't from these 5, you can. Dan, we did talk to you beforehand. You are going to start us off with best actor. So Dan, who was your best actor of 1980?
I don't think, even though I believe John Hurt is phenomenal. I mean, I cannot use the word phenomenal enough. Capital letters. It's sad that we couldn't have had a tie and they both could get trophies.
Right.
I have to go with Jake LaMotta. I think they absolutely got this right in 1981. Of all these awards, one of the few things they got right that year was Robert De Niro. I mean, just look at his filmography previous to this, people. The Deer Hunter, Taxi Driver, Mean Streets. These are all before Raging Bull. I mean, his Godfather, he played young Vito Corleone. He deserved this, and he earned this Academy Award that year. So,
cool.
Raging Bull, Robert De Niro.
Respect.
So between me and Chad, you went first for Best Actor last time with Edmund Gwenn, so I'm going to go first for Best Actor now.
Okay.
I am going to actually go with one that was not even nominated for the Oscar. I'm going to go with the one that I like the best out of these 5, next to Robert De Niro. That probably would have been my pick, but I'm going to go with Donald Sutherland for Ordinary People. I think his performance and that last scene just absolutely wrecked me. I think him being that middle ground, he had the hardest, path to walk. He had to be the one to kind of be the one to see both sides, but also be able to cry and break down at the end. And that is why he's going to be my pick, because I think it's the best performance of those actors in that movie. I know Judd Hirsch and Timothy Hutton were nominated, but he didn't even get nominated. And I think he was honestly my favorite of those male performances in that film. Chad, who's your best actor of 1980?
I want to say definitely, I love what Dan said about Robert De Niro. Respect. He's one of the greats of all time, obviously. Donald Sutherland was my second. That is so cool that we both had that same thing. However, mine is John Hurt.
Cool.
Yeah, I just love, how he, had to work through all of that makeup and all of that prosthetics or whatever they did, but like you still see the eyes and just like,
Mhm.
the pain in his eyes, just like all of these scenes where he goes from, low to a proper gentleman and he acts and he has to like try to vocalize and just do all these, things. It just must have been so hard to do.
Yeah.
And I just, yeah, exactly. I think if there could have been a tie with him and De Niro, that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely John Hurt for me.
So
And
now
he's
let's go in
Ollivander too.
let's go in Ollivander, of course. Let's go in reverse order for actress. Chad, who is your best actress?
My best actress is Mary Tyler Moore, Ordinary People.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of very similar to Donald Sutherland. I just thought Ordinary People had some of the best acting I saw in this slate, and Mary Tyler Moore was just, I think, the best. Sissy Spacek was amazing too, but like Mary Tyler Moore, just the way, exactly like you explained it, even when we were talking about the movie, like she had those two sides to her, but then like she would go and she would sit in the bedroom and just kind of like look at the bedroom, and just like not even say anything. And I just think that, and then when she actually had to be confronted by Donald Sutherland and Timothy Hutton and just be so defensive and then just have to learn. And I just I loved her performance.
Yeah. So Chad, you took my pick, but I'm gonna go actually with one that also wasn't nominated. Both of my picks were not nominated for Oscars, but are part of these 5 movies. So that's our rules on this show. But I'm picking Natasha Kinski because I think she had a really tough job about having to, kind of similar to Mary Tyler Moore, like keeping those emotions bottled in, especially doing this at the length of twice some of these movies at 3 hours, being able to give a consistent performance, still have a really good growth and arc, but be able to really contain herself in every scene. And then at the end, when she finally does, kind of come into her own, and then just seeing the subtle changes she makes to her physicality and her character and her performance, I think it's really strong. I know some people have criticized her, because of the accent or whatever, but she's German. She's playing an English woman. They filmed it in France, and the director's Polish. It's hard to get the accent right, but I think she definitely had the strongest performance. Dan, who's your pick for Best Actress of 1980?
Well, I forgot to say, Robert Duvall and The Great Santini.
Mm-hmm.
To me, there's a reason why Donald Sutherland doesn't get nominated in that category, because the real father of the year, Robert Duvall and The Great Santini, he is absolutely unbelievable as this colonel who's just treats his kids like they're in the military, and this whole life, there's a basketball scene where he just gets out there and says, "You don't take this guy out, you're not coming home. Don't even bother coming home." I mean, he's just such an overbearing father. That's the reason why Donald Sutherland doesn't get nominated, because he's so just kind of subdued.
Yeah,
Robert
I'll check
Duvall,
that out.
Oh my God, The Great Santini. It's on HBO Max right now. You can see it. Yeah, I have to go with the winner, which is Sissy Spacek and Coal Miner's Daughter. She, to me, absolutely deserved this Academy Award for Best Actress. It was a long time coming for. I mean, her career leading up to this. Once again, like Robert De Niro, she had done the work previously, and she deserved to win it this year for this role. And doing all your own singing and doing all the various things she had to do, growing up from a 14-year-old to an adult, and so forth. And then you start seeing her get depressive, start taking pills and stuff. She goes the whole gambit of what you would want in a musical biopic from an actress depicting a real life person. So I really felt what she was going through, and I just absolutely, Sissy Spacek, phenomenal. Natasha Kinski was my second, and then I had Goldie Hawn and Private Benjamin. Rarely see comedic performances nominated for the Academy Award, and I thought she's great in this. Eileen Brennan as the drill sergeant, or whatever. Just the back and forth between these two. Goldie Hawn, fantastic in Private Benjamin. If you haven't seen it,
I have not seen that one either. I'll have to check it out. So at the end of the day, our Best Picture winner for the year is The Elephant Man. My Best Actor is Donald Sutherland in Ordinary People. My Best Actress, Natasha Kinski in Tess. Chad's Best Actor is John Hurt in The Elephant Man. His Best Actress is Mary Tyler Moore in Ordinary People. And Dan's Best Actor is the Best Actor of the Oscars, which is Robert De Niro in Raging Bull. And his Best Actress is the Best Actress at the Oscars, and that is Sissy Spacek for Coal Miner's Daughter. I'm glad this is the one we did 3 people on, because there's so many good performances. I would have hated for me and Chad to only have to pick 4 and snub some others. So I'm glad we were able to talk about 6 great performances and just 5 really, really interesting films. Yeah, any closing thoughts on 1980? Dan, Chad, anyone?
Yeah, well, I want to just talk to you about some of these other categories.
For sure. Yeah.
Best director, Martin Scorsese would have been my winner. David Lynch would have been my second. Roman Polanski would have been my third. Irvin Kershner would have been my fourth for The Empire Strikes Back, and then Michael Apted for Coal Miner's Daughter. I would have kicked out the winner, Robert Redford. He would have been out of there. That's supporting actor. I actually like this category. I had Timothy Hutton winning. Joe Pesci would have been second. Judd Hirsch third. Tommy Lee Jones, who wasn't even nominated, fourth. Harrison Ford fifth. Honorable mentions: Anthony Hopkins, Best Supporting Actress. The winner was Mary Steenburgen. She was great in Melvin and Howard. Nobody can see this movie unless you want to watch it on YouTube, because it's on YouTube for free.
There you go.
Kathy Moriarty for Raging Bull. Eileen Brennan, like I mentioned. Carrie Fisher for The Empire Strikes Back. And then Lauren Hutton. I don't know if she's related to Timothy Hutton or not for American Gigolo. But I would have kicked out, if I had my druthers, I would have kicked out Ordinary People and had The Empire Strikes Back in the 5 for Best Picture. How can you deny The Empire Strikes Back as one of the greatest films of 1980? It's a travesty that that film was not in the 5. It's one of the greatest sequels of all time. It's one of the greatest films of all time. It had the greatest ending of all time. Luke, I am your father. No! I mean, just phenomenal. It goes to multiple locations. They had problems filming it in the winter locations. I mean, come on. How do you not put The Empire Strikes Back in that 5?
I actually liked Dan's performance of No more than Mark Hamill's. Let me throw that out there.
I was gonna say maybe it has to do with the fact that it was a sequel, and back then some people were like, "What? Wait, that can't be." They didn't like the plot twist. Maybe that could be why. I have no idea. It's very interesting because my dad also grew up around the same time and saw Empire Strikes Back in theaters and loved that movie so much and probably would agree. It's interesting because some of the most famous movies, arguably the 2 most famous from 1980, Empire Strikes Back and The Shining, were not nominated for Best Picture. And The Shining, I think, snubbed completely for Oscars. And then even my favorite comedy of all time, Airplane, I would also put in the Best Picture conversation too. If we could extend it to 10 back then, I wish they could have, but they unfortunately can't. But nowadays they are, and they're committing to it. So we'll actually be back in 2 months to talk about that once those nominations are set. But next month, because it's Black History Month in February and because of the recent death, unfortunately, of Sidney Poitier, we are covering the year of 1967, which features not 1 but 2 Sidney Poitier movies, and he was not nominated for either of them. For some reason, we'll talk about it next month, but those movies are Bonnie and Clyde, Dr. Dolittle, The Graduate, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and the Best Picture winner of that year, In the Heat of the Night. That is a pretty stacked slate. I know you're not going to be on that episode, Dan, but do you have any preliminary thoughts on that year at all?
I mean, In the Heat of the Night, wow, what a phenomenal film. The Graduate, oh my God, chef's kiss for The Graduate. How can you not nominate both Rod Steiger and Spencer Tracy, and you don't nominate Sidney Poitier for either film? How can you make this mistake? This is egregious. This is one of the most egregious mistakes next to The Empire Strikes Back. Maybe more than The Empire Strikes Back.
Maybe the theme of this year will be just like talking about years that had big upsets or big shocks or big snubs. Because we definitely talked about one, Raging Bull versus Ordinary People, that debate here, and Empire Strikes Back not getting nominated. Next month we're definitely going to talk about Sidney Poitier.
We should just do a full episode of just us yelling about. We'll have Dan on. We'll just yell about Oscar shit. We'll go, what the hell?
Yeah, like the SAGs when they didn't nominate Kristen Stewart this year for Spencer, which I hope does not translate at the Oscars. We'll see. We're getting a rant in 2 months if she's not, but that'll be interesting.
That'd be awful. Awful.
But anyway, thank you so much, Dan, for joining us. I mean, you really were
Thank
one
you.
of the first people to tell us like you liked the show and that it was such a good format and a good idea, and we really appreciate that. It really helped us
Definitely.
give us our confidence to carry on and keep doing this and fine tune some things. So thank you for joining us and bringing 1980 to our our filmographies, because I hadn't seen any of these movies and Chad had only seen a few, so it was really nice to like experience all these for the first time for this show. So thank you for that. Any closing words, and would you ever like to be back, and what year do you want to tackle again, and anything?
Yeah.
Dan?
1999. Oh wow, what a oh god, please, I would love to do 1999. I'm even thinking about doing a podcast, just movies that came out in 1999. If you have
good year. Good year. Anyway, Dan, where can they find you online if they want to check out any of your reviews or stuff? You're a working critic right now. Like, where can they find you, either on social media or online?
Yeah, I am a film critic in Orlando, Florida. I write for a website called disappointmentmedia.com. I do everything from retrospective TV shows, obviously new movies. Haven't been a lot of new movies out. I'm going to be doing a lot of anniversaries like The Godfather, Casablanca, Liar Liar in the next couple months. And hopefully we'll start getting some movies where I can review new movies here, because we're not getting a lot of new movies. I'm like Chad. I'm going to do some reviews from Sundance. My blog, whatever I don't write for disappointmentmedia.com, I write on my own blog, from the fourthrow.wordpress.com. So you can go there and you see those two places. You're going to get a lot of writings and reviews from me.
Nice.
And I already put out my top 10 of the year on my blog. So if you want to go on there and check my top 10 of the year.
Can you tell us also, what number one is for you, Dan?
My number one was this poster behind me called Dune.
Nice.
Oh, okay.
Very, very good.
I thought you were going to say Coda, and I was going to get really excited, but
I love Coda. I absolutely love Coda. I love the legs that Coda has had. But my name, Dan Skip Allen, on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, or DP Skip Allen. It could be any of these different things. I have variations on my name on social media. So yeah, I just want to say thank you guys. I know this has been a long road for me to get here, but I just want to say thank you for having me on. And obviously you guys have seen the passion that I have, especially for 1980.
Yeah, and we appreciate it. We were getting our schedule together. We're like, why don't we kick off the year, try out a guest for the first time? We don't want this to be a too common thing, just because it's a lot with scheduling, and also having a guest watch 5 or 10 movies is a tough task. So thank you for watching the movies as well before going on, because it's a big task to watch 5 movies for someone else's show. Chad, where can they find you online, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of all over the place. This is kind of the biggest thing that I do, I think. But, I also have like my own like little channel over there. I think it's just under my name, Chadwick Webb. You're on there a lot. We rank stuff. We did like Christmas movies and Edgar Wright. And I have to have a Harry Potter one we did. I have to actually post that soon. And then, I'm over in the fan leagues doing trivia, debates, over at TMG, stuff like that. Trying to watch a lot of these Sundance movies. So I post those on Letterboxd. I got my own Twitter, at Chadwick_Webb. That's pretty much it. But I wanted to note, Dan mentioned doing some sort of retrospective for The Godfather. I think AMC's actually re-releasing this into Dolby or something like that. So I'm like, gotta go check that shit out. So
we'll get to that trilogy eventually. I think we got to sit down and fine tune the schedule a little bit, but I got some big trilogies coming up. I know we're gonna tackle one big trilogy this year at some point later down the line in 2022. We'll get there when we get there. You can find me at Dylan_Randazzo, Letterboxd, and Twitter, and of course here at the Dill Pickle Movie Network. This is a video exclusive. There's no podcast for this, so please like this up, subscribe it, share it. A lot of great discussions, especially regarding the upset of Ordinary People beating Raging Bull. I hope Dan's Luke Skywalker impression goes viral after this. Help us get there, people. But yeah, you can also find my stuff on some podcasts for several shows that are on my channel as well. So just look up the channel. There are some long-term shows, long-form shows, and some smaller reviews and stuff too. I will have a Sundance Best of the Fest video at some point after I'm done watching all these Sundance films, because that's a fun way to kick off the year. And then we'll get into Oscar season, and Chad and I will talk about this year's nominees soon enough. So next month, 1967. This was 1980. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time.